This is day 5. Of the November 93 7-day retreat in Springwater. The first question for this talk will be, someone's remark yesterday in a group meeting, you have mentioned all the positive sides and aspects of meditation, but you have not mentioned the actual or potential dangers of meditation. Are there dangers in meditation? Which, before to look at this intelligently, we have to ask what we mean by meditation. Because the word means many things to many people and traditions and groups. And I don't want to go into the many things it means to many people. The way, if the word is used at all here, the way of an opening to what is actually going on in a human being, becoming aware of the thoughts, the memories, the imagery, and their connection with the physical state of being, and the connection of the physical well-being or ill-being, the moods, to further thoughts and further reflexive action on the part of the body, revealing what is going on around oneself, a more accurate listening and looking, or at least becoming aware that there is no accurate listening and looking, because our moods and prejudices and ways of thinking and wanting and fearing affect our perception. We can't look and listen and think clearly when we're afraid, panicky, anxious, angry. To become aware of all of that in a spacious, non-judgmental, non-fault-finding way. What can be dangerous about that? To come more in touch with the truth and see the false as the false. Is there any danger in that? Or is the danger our not seeing what is true about ourselves and each other? The power of our thoughts to distort our thinking and looking and acting. Not to see that is the danger. To struggle and strife and war with each other and kill each other and torture each other because of what we think we are and you are is a dangerous way of living. Dangerous is the understatement. The revealing of our angry or jealous or envious thoughts may bring pain. We may not want to see what thoughts and feelings and emotions and anticipated actions go on in ourselves. We may not want to see this because we are attached to an image of being non-violent or non-envious, generous, calm. So when in meditation or in quiet sitting, quiet looking and listening to talks and meetings, when in that quietness there is revealing of what really goes on, not just in those other people out there in the world, but in ourselves. It may be so painful that one may not want to look any further. And in the rare cases where it has been too painful for someone, the person may have withdrawn from doing this kind of work. Not necessarily for good. People may come back in a year and 2 years, sometimes after 10 years, feeling stronger and often reporting that they couldn't put it down anyways, occasional awareness of what was going on. Coming in touch with the truth of one moment. One thing the person mentioned was that it may slow down one's reactions to meditate, slow down one's affects. Again, it would have to be looked and examined by each one of us what this slowing down is. Is it a fear of saying anything? A fear of doing anything for fear one may say or do something wrong? Or does it take some time in the presence of somebody saying something to one or asking a question of one, does it take some time to look? Because one is not automatically firing an answer, which is our usual learned way of responding to each other, from memory, from learned past responses, which have partly been inculcated into us and partly they just emerge from our experiences, responding from experience, which may take no time, no deliberation as we call it, or a careful looking. And it is a wonderful thing when in talking to each other, and it does happen in the group meetings, there's some time when, after a question has been asked, for each one to really look and ponder and wonder and maybe discover some appropriate response. This slowness may not necessarily be an indication of increased obstruction in responding, but an increased spaciousness of looking. Taking time to really absorb the question, let it sink in, and allow, which is what is happening, allow also memory to supply some answers. Is this how it felt? Is that how it felt? Is this how it is? Memory is not disengaged necessarily in a meditative wondering and responding, but it does not fire automatically, compulsively. It is invited to give some data, some information, which as it emerges can also be looked at, whether it is appropriate or not, or whether does not pertain. I find it, this is one of the nicest and most beautiful aspects of working together, one-on-one or in groups, that we can take this space-time and don't need to react automatically. Or if we do, then we can say, what did you mean by this? And if I'm asked, what did you mean by this? I'll look again. I appreciate that question. I hope people who are asked, what do you mean by that? Don't feel put down, but invited to look further, deeper, closer, less hurriedly. And what we often discover is that we don't know what we're saying. We use words without depth. In so much of our automatic conversations, we've never wondered about the depth, whether there is a depth to the words we use. We may find there is and allow it to be expressed, take the time to express it, or we may realize there was no depth to it. It was just an automatic use of language without really knowing what it is referring to in reality that we're saying. Now let me not shirk this question because I was asked twice about it. Is there a possible danger in meditation? And this is what I can come up with. If meditation, whatever the particular activity may be, leads to more feeding of one's self-image, or the establishment of a new self-image, and the pride connected with being a meditator, superior to others who are not meditating, and not be aware of that, that's of course dangerous. It's not just dangerous, it's separating. It contributes to our common disease of attaching to the idea of ourselves and not in touch with what we really truly are, beyond all ideas and imagery. Of course, this does not just refer to meditation, refers to anything we're doing. If we paint paintings, and the more and more important thing is that we are a painter, I can tell people that we're painters, then the essence is not in drawing or painting, but in being someone, which is separative. Sometimes gives people problems. Remember one woman who wanted to paint so much, but she was so afraid of becoming something in the process. Partly because it revealed itself. Wanting to paint was not just wanting to paint, but also to be something respectable. Now, it's not respectable in all societies. In this, it is not such a thing of respect, but in other cultures, it is a thing of respect, particularly if one is famous, well known. Well, famousness is always respectable in this country, no matter what you do. The latest, well, I don't know. So that's one danger, becoming somebody. The other danger is that a new conditioning is added to our wealth of old conditionings. Rather than meditation, I'm using this word right now, revealing conditioning, automaticness, ignorance of what we're doing, it adds a new layer of conditioning. And that often happens with automatic practices, mechanical, repetitive practices. Not just the mechanical practices, but often the environment in which they take place can become a new conditioning, becoming attached to new forms, new ambiences, new activities, ceremonies, rituals. We were talking about it last night. Everybody, almost everybody in the group agreed that we love rituals. It's fun. That's what almost was the consensus. And can it just be loved and fun, but not become conditioned by it, that I have to have it, or that I defend my rituals against your rituals because they're better. They're the real ones, the true ones, the longest tradition, and so forth. to enjoy singing together or dancing together. There's a real energy in that. But can the mind remain aware and watchful, wakeful? Whether a new attachment is being formed, a new ideology, a new belief which is defended and clung to. That's the defense aids the clinging, and the clinging aids the defense. People tell me, and I meet them all the time, wherever I go, people who may have even 20 years ago, 15 years ago, had a repetitive practice, long given up, long finished, and then they tell me they still find when a disagreeable feeling comes up, voicing that erstwhile repetitive practice to suppress the feeling, to control it, so as not to have to face it or feel it, be in touch with it. That's what a repetitive practice can do, and there's danger in that. The danger of not facing all that puts this body-mind together, which includes our fears and desires and angers and jealousy, envy, and also our joys and love. To be openly in touch with what comes up so it can come and go like the clouds without needing to solidify and calcify, without needing to be shunned. Because what we shun and suppress or repress operates much more dangerously under the surface, festering without air and light. I probably haven't thought of everything that could be said on this subject. This is one thing I usually say at the beginning of a retreat. Please don't expect me to always say everything about everything. I can only touch on a part. You could never say the whole thing. That's also what group meetings are for, to say, well, what about this? What about that aspect? Look at things from different sides. The more people are really looking, the more sides we get. So what's the whole thing? Maybe that is not just all the different aspects put together. Maybe something different altogether. Another question that plagues the mind is, why do scenarios, thinking about my sad life situation, an angry episode, what frightens me, why do these thoughts return time and time again? Someone may say, I've thought through this, I don't know how many times, at least 100, maybe 1,000. Why do the thoughts keep coming back? For a moment there may be freedom from them and peacefulness experienced, and then, boom, there is the thought again, and becoming a train of thought and engaging in short time the whole body in sadness, anger, rage, fear, whatever. Why can't it be done and finished with? I think that's a good question to keep hanging there in the mind, so that the next time this thing comes up, maybe we'll watch it and be awake to it sooner than last time when the body was already on fire with anger or fear or sadness. Because the sooner a thought, and every train of thought starts with a single thought. This is not said theoretically, this is observed, has been observed in oneself. If it's the first thought, or the first 2-3 thoughts, and there is wakefulness, attention, it need not transmute itself into a total organismic upset. Because awareness severs the connection between thinking and emoting. Or it does not allow it to happen. It short circuits the process. But to come back to the question, why does it have to happen time and time again? One answer is because it has happened time and time again. The more some process rolls on, thinking and the connection with the sensations, emotions, the glands pouring out adrenaline and whatever, inciting muscles and organs, and more thoughts about the horror of the situation or action to be taken in revenge or in protection. The more this cycle runs, the more it becomes strengthened. And there must be physiological counterparts to this strengthening. A thickening maybe of the synapses or whatever. I'm not very knowledgeable about this. But that much I know from experience. The less one goes over an episode that caused pain or anger or fear, the more likely it is not to occur again. The more one has gone over something, the more likely that it will occur again, because it's more likely, more physiologically likely, or electrochemically likely. We talked today about neurotransmitters and whatever. Thought being really neurotransmitter, chemicals carried to the different organs, like a key to a lock. So, there's nothing wrong with the first time or the second time. Maybe it takes 3 times or 10 times to really think this whole thing through. And the less mechanical it happens, and the more looking there is while it happens, being interested in it, attending by fits and spurts, may not be a complete sustained awareness, the more we learn about what happened. We also learn about this connection, that if these thoughts arise, this upset will inevitably follow, unless there's awareness. So to learn about it wholesomely, from moment to moment, is very helpful. Also, enlarging the context if possible. Usually we just think of what happened to me, poor me, or victimized me, or misunderstood me, or neglected, or not getting my way me. is it possible? And that's where imagination can really be of service to expand. What was the whole situation? What was the other person's mood, or what point were they trying to make? Were they just trying to be mean to me? Thoughtless? Or was there maybe something? Maybe I have to ask this person, find out some more. And what was the total situation? What was my state at the time this happened? To sort of let it grow in dimensions in going over it. If it's already bound to be coming up, let's have it three-dimensional at least. And really use the imagination as well as it is capable of also putting oneself in the shoes of the others as they see me. If that's possible. It's not impossible. And it can almost be a joyful experiment. Leaving this suffering me shell and entering into some other, maybe just a suffering shell of conditioning and reaction. Maybe it wasn't just conditioning and reaction. Maybe the person saw something about me and wants to communicate that, and my defenses won't let it through. So can that happen? This is a different going over than the one-dimensional mechanical running off of a scenario of the past. Also, I can't go into it all. When part of the scenario, when it runs mechanical according to all our conditioned reactions, one aspect is to seek preparation for the future, how not to get hurt again, or how to pay back this person. And one may engage in dialogues with a person where one isn't so tongue-tied as one may have found oneself. The anger over that can also be stirred in the body over not having been able to say what I really should have said and could have said. That's one thing to go over and over, isn't it? Mechanically, automatically. So can we dis-mechanize and dis-automatize this process and bring looking into it? Looking and a real desire for understanding the whole thing. Maybe this will help us to become more aware of ourselves in aspects that we're not aware of, where we rub someone else wrong. Remember the first time someone said to me, "You yelled at me." I couldn't believe it, that I would yell at anybody. Here, I have yelled at my son in years past. Of course, in talking about it with a person already, a raised or intense voice to her meant yelling, because there was such fear and feeling of being invaded by a raised voice. So one can begin to watch how one talks and reflect on it and wonder about it. Become aware of it. Because we don't know. We are so used. There's nothing in the world we're more used to than ourselves. And whatever we are very used to, we're not aware of. But it's not inevitably so. It can happen. Light can penetrate through the thickest layer of inattention and ignorance and unawareness. So if one goes through this thing in this more multidimensional, open, listening and looking and wondering way, it may not occur again in this automatic way, which is so painful, and so one feels so helpless in its presence. And then maybe the urgency of this organism to evoke this again, because it feels like unfinished business, and all unfinished business seems to evoke a desire to finish it. But automaticness never finishes unfinished business, just adds to it. But maybe it can become finished business. And then if the habitual thought about it arises again, because thought is so habitual, if there's a spark of attention, it doesn't have to go any place. Attention will not allow that connection to happen. It'll just remain here, now, with what is. Which is nothing spectacular. It's whatever's going on in all of its richness, really. If one looks for the spectacular, one doesn't see the richness of this moment that can only reveal itself when there's some openness and sensitivity. And not expecting something different. Expecting something spectacular to happen makes the mind crude or dull. But not expecting anything spectacular to happen, but just being here, may increase the sensitivity to the little things, the inconspicuous, which is there all the time, inside and out. One person said, it's nice to be in the country. I used to live in the country, now I live in the city. And being here, I realize I can smell the weather. Because if one was living in the country all the time, moved back to the country, one may find one gets used to that smell. And it doesn't mean anything anymore. The mind, the restless mind, wants something more exciting or different. It's an amazing mechanism to get used to what is there. After a while, at first arriving in the mountains or at the coast, on the beach, it's magnificent, the difference to one's home environment. And then after a few days or a week or 5 weeks, is it still so magnificent, or has the mind gotten used, the body-mind gotten used to it? And what is that getting used to something? I want to find out. Whether this is inevitable, must be some kind of a survival mechanism, maybe. Not have to constantly be on the alert for everything new, but know it, so it doesn't have to be examined for possible dangers. This may be one explanation. But it's also the restlessness, wanting stimulation. But why not where we are, particularly if one does live in a beautiful environment? What's lacking? Can one examine this? What is going on with this body-mind? And the thoughts, that dull it? I don't know. Find out. It's a good question to put, whether one can wake up in the morning and see the world as new. Feel this body with all of its functions of hunger and eating, working, resting, walking. Feel it, sense it, see it, hear it anew. And if it's not so, what is in the way? What is the fog? Not get victimized now by the storyline, well, I'm so dull, I can't do it, I should, and then feel depressed over that. But wonder. Look out the window. Look at your hands. The hands washing the arms, the body, the neck, the face, the hair. Water running over the body. Why don't we feel it? Why aren't we there with it? The amazingness of it. If it's not old hat, which means we don't feel it, we think of something else and better or worse. Actually, the fact, the truth of the matter is that every moment is new, and there is very broad-based agreement scientifically, medically, research-wise, that this body is never the same from moment to moment, let alone from year to year or from 7 years to 7 years. It's always renewing and regenerating itself. It's only the ingrained habit patterns which make the old out of the new. Put the stamp of oldness on some new organ or tissue. The old habits of thinking and feeling and reacting. So, does one see the urgency of bringing them to light? It's not easy, because we're so used to ourselves. We think that's normal. Can't do anything about it. And we can't. It's awareness that changes. Not me changing myself. It's just changing conditionings around or putting one on top of the other. But a moment of seeing, of direct listening or insight, that's a powerful change in our seemingly routine, drab existence. And of course, nature around us, if one is fortunate enough to still have some access to it, performs miracles all the time. Have you looked at the branches with the new buds on them? It's utterly amazing. We talk about the Dead Seas and the leaves dropping off, and there are these new buds so freshly packaged for the winter. And the moment it gets warm, the windows swarm with flies. Where did they come from? It gets cold again, they're gone. Some of them drop dead. One fly in the bedroom was standing like a statue on its feet sideways, up. It was walking up the frame and there died. I tried to remove it. The little feet suction cups were still holding on to that window frame. It was intact as I saw it, but taking it off, it just crumbled into dust. But there are more of them there now. Buzzing at that window, they never go anyplace else. Well, up the ceiling maybe. But window is where they want to be. Which reminds me, as a last bit of interesting information, of a hearing about an experiment where flies were raised in a jar. Have you heard that? A covered jar. These flies were raised in that jar. And when the jar was opened, no fly left the jar. They all stayed in there. Maybe one or two pioneers ventured out. It's same with us. We don't see that we're free. We just think we have to live in this jar. We will end here for today.